I'm going to give you three, and then we can unpack each of them. Capacity to learn, critical thinking, and fearlessness.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I am your host, Nick Olson. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. Making his second appearance on the show, the founder of Caber Hill Advisors based out of Chicago, focus on healthcare facility services, business services, and the food and bev industry. A longtime Lions fan to me being a Packers fan, so you might get some fighting here. I don't know. We'll find out. You have to watch the whole episode to see. Welcome, Craig Castelli, to the episode. Craig, how you doing?
Nick, thanks for having me. Great to be back. Great to see you as always. Go Lions.
Yeah. I think we should put it on the record here. We got to bet, Packers Lions for the season.
I told they play each other in the home opener too, so we'll get, resolution on this.
Immediate feedback. I don't know if I want that bet this year. I don't know. But really appreciate you joining the show again. Second appearance, like I said. And we're going to talk about just developing talent in M&A, the long-term approach. And, it could seem like a daunting thing to invest in your team, especially, monetarily. Do you, is it worth the spend? Do I have enough work for them? All the things that go through your mind. And we're here to talk about that. So let's get started here. Well, why is talent such a critical driver of success for a lower middle market M&A firm?
It's a great question. I think that question in of itself is going to kind of pervade this entire episode. This is a people business, Nick. And yes, we use technology. AI is increasingly becoming a part of what everybody does. But ultimately, people do business with people. And our team has to work with our client, with the team on the other side of the table, with all the other service providers around us. And, if we can't get along, if we can't work through all of, the challenges, issues, complications that arise, if we can't bring various levels of competency to these engagements, to these transactions, we're not going to get anywhere. And, ultimately, it's not our years of experience that get deals done. It's not the number of deals that we've closed in the past that get the next deal done. It's the talent and capabilities of the team that can leverage all those experiences, that can leverage all of the knowledge, and that can ultimately work together and continue to advance themselves, that ultimately bring the best outcomes for our clients.
Yeah, and talent is such a vague word, but, you want to be able to adapt. You want to be able to, go out there and do the best for your client. That adaptability, because during an M&A deal, a lot of things get thrown at you. I would say talent kind of correlates with that component. Would you agree?
Yeah, there's no question about that. It is a direct correlation all the way through.
So when you founded Caber Hill back in 2014, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in attracting talent to your organization?
Well, I'm going to brag first, because the first two full-timers to join the organization, Peter Holton and David O'Gurick, are still here to this day in leadership roles in the organization, kicking butt every day. So we did something right all the way back there. But honestly, I think my own limitations held us back. It is a real mental hurdle to overcome when you're starting a business with such a long sales cycle, like M&A advisory firm, to commit salaries, benefits, all these fixed costs, when you never have crystal clear visibility into when you're going to earn that next success fee, when you're actually going to have the cash flow to support those investments. Every net new hire might be a year or two to fully pay itself back. Now, 5 years later, you realize it's the best decision you ever made, and wish you would have done it sooner. But in the early going, for me, it was honestly just rationalizing the spend with the timing of the cash flows, and doing my best to kind of weather the early going until the deal started to close.
What kind of got you over that hurdle to be like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm gonna take the leap of faith. Like I know we need to do it. I'm just going to do it. Like what tipped you over the edge?
So I had a conversation at one point, I can't remember if it was before I had started Caber Hill or shortly thereafter, with father of a friend who's the CEO of a very large retail chain. And, we're batting, different ideas back and forth. And, I made the comment, maybe what I really need to do is just go hire a bunch of analysts so it can free me up to do the most important work. And, ultimately I'll be able to bring in a lot more business. And his reaction was something along the lines of, yeah, dummy, what took you so long to realize that? But, it was ultimately, any business decision is about allocation of resources and our own time and our own skills, our resources, just like dollars and other tools are resources. And I at some point finally accepted the fact that, if I paid somebody to do certain things that I don't want to say were, beneath me, but were certainly not the highest and best use of, my time and talents, and I can maximize my own output, and Peter, who is joining as a brand new managing director, can maximize his output, the revenue is going to accelerate way faster that the cost is going to look like nothing over time.
Right. Very, very true. Very true. What are some of the qualities that you found, kind of over time you brought, in hiring, bringing on people that kind of stuck and with those that are here with you long term that really define what a good person is for this industry?
I'm going to give you 3 and then we can unpack each of them. Capacity to learn, critical thinking, and fearlessness. So first of all, capacity to learn. Industries are always evolving. The M&A environment is always evolving, whether it's driven by, regulatory changes, whether it's driven by the stage of consolidation in a certain sector, or, other, macroeconomic or geopolitical factors. There's always change. And if you think that you can just keep doing things the same way you always have because they've always been successful, eventually you're going to learn a painful lesson that, you didn't keep up with something and, you're no longer at the top of your game. Then we can talk about getting into new sectors. Our firm has a certain level of specialization, but within the areas we specialize, whether it's healthcare, facility services, to name 2, there are a lot of subsectors. And you go from one subsector to the next, maybe 75% is the same or similar, but that other 25% could be vastly different. If you don't have the capacity to learn and learn quickly and have a very short learning curve, it's hard to jump from one sector to the next. And so, it's something that we preach from the most senior managing director on down to an analyst or an associate. You have to have the, capacity to learn, absorb a lot of information quickly and adapt to the change. Number 2 is critical thinking. You cannot take at face value what just about anybody tells you in this business. Even the business owners who are our clients, to some degree, they may hold something back from us. They may be negotiating with us throughout the process, or simply they may not have thought about an issue from the angle that the buyer is going to think about the issue. So you have to take whatever information is provided. You have to apply some serious critical thinking to it to ultimately present a business in the best possible light, to work through whatever critical deal issue is, and to ultimately get to a successful transaction. And then the third aspect is fearlessness. We look at our firm and the team follows a typical progression: analyst to associate to VP to director to managing director. By the time they make it to managing director, they're a full-blown lead, engagement lead. They're responsible for business development. Well, you don't just go from no business development to 100% business development. So, around the associate to VP level, we start introducing them to, some networking, some client-facing responsibilities. And then as they continue to progress, they get more and more of that. But the first time you have to go sit down with a business owner by yourself, it's a little nerve-wracking. The first time you have to pick up the phone and make a cold call or have a tough conversation, it's challenging. And it's natural to, have a little bit of nerves going into that. Some can get over it, some can't. If we give you a list of 20 companies to call, and we're not a big cold call firm, but if we're doing buy-side work, sometimes that's necessary. If we're trying to circle up with buyers who haven't responded to an outreach, it's, certainly necessary. If you find every excuse in the book to not make those calls because you're nervous about the rejection, you're probably not going to go very far. So, you have to take some risk. You have to have some fearlessness in order to, succeed and progress in this business.
No doubt. You can't, you got to take risks. You got to be willing to put yourself out there and not overthink it, because if you do overthink it, that's when hesitation comes in and you might doubt yourself. So definitely agree with that. Now, when you're looking to add talent, are you thinking, like, what is your opinion or your focus? Is it bringing on younger talent new to the industry? You want to grow them over time? Or are you looking for someone who, end of their career, post 30 years in corporate, whatever, and bringing on someone that way? Like, how are you looking at developing and building your team?
It's a mix of both. Our last 4 hires have joined us from other investment banking firms. 3 of those 4 have come in on the junior team, joined as either an analyst or an associate, and they're looking to in the case of one, he was with a buy side only firm, wanted to get into sell side and was willing to start at the bottom, even though he had some years of experience, a lot of education behind him, was willing to start at the bottom to learn sell side. The other 2 came from very, very large household name Wall Street type investment banks, and they wanted a better quality of life. They wanted to work with, even more so than quality of life, work with businesses and business owners that were more tangible to them. Nobody has a personal connection to a public debt offering for a large cap publicly traded company. Most people have some sort of personal connection to entrepreneurs, especially when those entrepreneurs are in professions that you may have interacted with personally at various points in your life. The work ends up taking on a lot more meaning. We can't pay like the Wall Street investment banks can pay. I think we pay well. I know we're probably going to get into this topic a little bit more as we keep talking here, but we can offer a lot of other things that attract them. They bring to us a lot of regimented skills. They're used to working 100+ hours a week. We don't ask it, but every once in a while, late nights and weekends arise, and they have no problem handling the extra hours. They have no problem handling the stress of tough personalities and other side of the deal, because who's tougher than your boss when you're working at a Wall Street investment bank at 3 a.m. on a Friday night and you're the lowest analyst on the totem pole. They bring a lot plus just the technical skills. So that's been great. But we also recently hired a managing director who has been a career investment banker, joined us from a much larger firm, and it was a similar thing. It was just a fit for what he was looking to do at this point in his career. It hasn't always been the case. Some of other MDs come out of operating businesses. Most of them have some type of buy side experience as opposed to the advisory experience. That's worked well at the senior level. We're pretty flexible in that regard. We're looking for their capabilities and their fit with our culture more than the words that are on the resume. For the junior hires, we like them to have some level of experience, and those are the folks who we want to offer them a lifetime career here if they think it's the right place for them to be. We want to see them progress kind of through that hierarchy that I laid out and make it all the way to the top.
Yeah, why is that important to not only for them but also for the firm? If you're investing in them, they're here for a long time. Obviously, that poses some benefits to the firm.
Yeah, it's expensive and frankly a distraction to have to get out there and replace people when they leave, especially if it's not a planned departure. Longer term employees know our systems, they know our processes, they know the types of clients that we work with. They may have developed relationships with our referral sources. So, for all of those reasons, it just makes the team gel and makes us a lot more effective. I think we do a pretty good job of ramping new hires pretty quickly and sliding them into those roles. And, recently, especially, on that support team, the new folks we've been adding have been increasing the size of the team, not replacing departures. We've had, knock on wood, a lot of stability there, since the pandemic. But ultimately, what would you rather spend your time doing? Conducting interviews and teaching a brand new person, or coaching somebody who is already here, is already trained up, who you see a lot of potential, and really helping them to maximize the potential inside of them.
How do you keep them engaged? How do you show that investment in them to keep them around, to keep them motivated, to help them want to stay with you?
It's definitely a two-way conversation. It's as much about what we need them to do as where we see their interests and their capabilities really aligning. And so I'll give you an example. The individual came to us from a buy side firm. There's certain aspects of buy side work that he has no interest in doing, but he has a lot of experience engaging with private equity investors and others who are on the buy side. And as we grew, we found that we were somewhat fragmented and compartmentalized in how we covered the buyer universe. The team that does healthcare talked to all the healthcare investors. The team that does facility services talked to all the facility services investors. Data was stored in the CRM in different ways. We didn't always communicate with each other. Hey, I talked to this guy about this facility services deal. He said he's really interested in healthcare as well. You should show him that deal. So we decided to centralize the role. Take this individual who's, he's at the associate level in our firm, still has some of those responsibilities. We added sponsor coverage to his plate. So now we have one lead in that area. It gave him something, a new challenge that seems to engage him and inspire him, because now we bring him in on every transaction to have him weigh in on who he knows, beyond who the MDs know, who he knows are going to be the right buyers for the situation. And, it makes us better as a firm. Now, if he reacted poorly to us asking him to take this on, could I have forced him to do it? Sure, it's my company. I can do whatever I want. I wouldn't ever want to do that. And knock on wood, we haven't had to force people to, take on, responsibilities like that. With each one, it's a little bit different. We have some mandatory development that people go through, but we also will say to the team, hey, pick out a conference each year that you want to go to. It could be from one of the industries we serve. It could be more of an M&A oriented conference. Think about something that you're either interested in learning or interested in expanding your network in, and you can go. We'll send you, and we'll figure out as we get there what the mandate is for your time on the ground there. But it's another way for them to develop a new skill, learn a little bit more, and it's relatively low cost and low lift. So it's really, regardless of what we see as their natural path, we always want to give them the opportunity to weigh in, to ask, to state their goals, and then we work with them. Ultimately, if you're here for more than a couple of years, you more than likely see yourself progressing up to managing director. But I think kind of the conclusion is that it's not just the same straight path for everybody. There are a number of ways that we can help individuals get there.
Right. Talent development is a long-term commitment. Do you have an example maybe of, that investment, a long-term investment paying off for you yet? Have you realized that yet, or is it something kind of still in the works?
Well, I think the sponsor coverage example I just gave is certainly one of those where, we were able to basically create a brand new responsibility within our firm. It's not an atypical title in larger investment banks. It's not as common in 10-person firms like we are. So I think that's a great example. The other one I'll give you is, Dave O'Gurick, who well. He's a real life example of somebody who we, brought out of the firm very early and has made a big impact. He's been here 11 plus years. He has gone from, he was a due diligence analyst when we hired him. And that was the mentality he brought. And that was very, very valuable at the time. He knew nothing about business development. He knew nothing about networking. Fast forward to today, a couple of years ago, he and his wife relocated to Phoenix. And he has essentially established a Cable Hill branch in that market. He's built a robust network for himself. He's figured out where we stand out from the crowd in a market that, frankly, is not nearly as saturated with investment banks as a place like Chicago is. And he's done an excellent job at, developing business there, building a name for us in that market from referral sources that we never would have interfaced with had he not, gone there and really, made the effort to get out, meet people, evangelize the Cable Hill gospel. Along the way, he's also gone from being an individual contributor to managing a team of, 3 to 5 people, depending on, volume of interns at, any one point in time. So, he's wearing all these hats. He's doing so, very effectively. I don't even want to tell you what I paid him when I first hired him, or how nervous what in hindsight seems like an inconsequential amount of money, made me feel committing that salary at that time. He's, really progressed in that area along the way as well, and deservedly so. But, whether you're looking at just kind of the role evolution, the tenure, or, the way he's been able to increase his own earnings along the way, it's been pretty transformative for all.
Yeah, it sounds like, and I would imagine just learning every role, is going to make you a better MD too.
There's no question. If you know how everything works internally, you know what buttons to push, how to articulate the process to clients and others. And yeah, it's extremely beneficial.
You just mentioned compensation. Of course, that's important, but what other non-financial factors do you see as most important to retaining people? I know you mentioned, conferences and things like that, but any other non-monetary type of factors that play into keeping people around?
I hate to sound cliche and say things like culture and work-life balance, but, it is the reality. We've really built a family environment here where everybody has each other's backs, and it affords people to work the way they want to work, and really allows them to hold themselves accountable, because when the team looks out for each other, it also in a way forces accountability on all. But I'll give you a couple examples. So one of the analysts we hired from a very large investment bank, he got married young. Despite coming in at more of a junior level, he's married and has been for a couple of years when he first joins us. And I get a call from him at 4:45 one afternoon, first couple of months in the job. Hey, Craig, I just want to see if it's okay if my wife and I go out to dinner tonight. It's our anniversary. I'll only be offline for a couple hours. I'll be able to get back online by like 10 p.m. tonight and get whatever needs to be done. I just said, what? I made him repeat it because I was so blown away by the question he asked. I said, if I see the green dot on your teams once between 5 p.m. tonight and 8 a.m. tomorrow, you're fired. Go enjoy your evening. Do not worry about work. The world will not fall apart between 5 p.m. tonight and 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Well, the reality is, at the previous place he worked, he was working the morning of his wedding. He was canceling holidays. He was canceling vacations. It was that stereotypical story that you hear about junior investment bankers and junior attorneys at the really, really large firms. It was also all he knew. So the fact that, he could come here, fast forward, he's had children, he's had paternity leave, he takes a vacation, he doesn't get bugged unless, there is something, mission critical that only he has access to. And it's those little things where we create the balance that helps. And I will say, Nick, there's one area where I'm really thankful for what the pandemic did for us. I used to always tell my team, going back, many, many years ago, I care about outcomes more than I care about anything else. I don't really care about when you work or where you work, obviously within some level of reason. I care about you getting the job done and getting the job done to the best of your ability and getting the job done without violating any legal or ethical standards. And if you've done that and it's noon on Friday and you don't have anything else to do, you should go play a round of golf. You don't need to sit around the office chasing your mouse around the screen just because I'm still there. But if it's 7 p.m. on Friday and we have a deadline and you still haven't gotten it done, you're probably going to have to cancel those evening plans and get it done, because we ultimately have a responsibility here, and it's probably on you that it wasn't done on time in the first place. Nobody ever believed me. Everybody would always try to beat me into the office. They try to wait for me to go until I left. No one would ever consider working from home other than, some of the most extreme scenarios. And, COVID happens. We're all forced to work from home. And people started to realize, I guess if I go take my dog for a 15-minute walk over the lunch hour when I don't have a call scheduled anyway, the world's not going to fall apart. Everything's going to be totally fine. So that level of trust and flexibility and their ability to earn that, respect it, treat everybody the same way, really brings us together as a team, allows everybody to understand that We're all adults. We're all focused on the same mission. For each client, we're focused on the same objective. I'm better at this part. You're better at that part. Let's all work together to, maximize that and get the job done.
Yeah, if anything, yeah, especially because, and I started right before the pandemic started here at CIA, and I didn't know M&A very well, but I do know that, people are always in the office. They're traveling a lot, going in person, with their clients, things like that. And then the pandemic hits, and it's like, now we're forced to do this. I mean, they could taught us, not only what you just described, but also that we can do business in a virtual environment and still have really, really good results.
Now, look, I prefer coming into an office versus working from home. I prefer an in-person meeting over a virtual meeting. Frankly, these days, I prefer an old-fashioned phone call over a virtual meeting. We all adapt to how the world has changed, but, to your point, it proves that we can do things more than just one way.
How do you balance? So you're talking about just, progression and things like that. And, you want to give those junior guys the experience. And how do you get experience if you're not doing the thing you want to experience in? So how do you balance like empowering a junior member to, get more client facing experience, but still protecting that kind of, that reputation, that client relationship, just so, you can feel good about that and not be like, hey, here, junior associate analyst, good luck with this client. Obviously there's a balancing act.
I mean, balance is the appropriate word. You start small and then you build. And as they show they can handle step one, you give them a shot at step two. If they can handle step two, more than once, on a repetitive basis, they move on to step three. So in practice, how does that play out? We try to make sure that the staff on the team can join, as many of the client calls, and then we're actually in market as many of the buyer calls as possible. In the very beginning, they're probably just listening, observing, taking notes. That evolves to, they may be the individual who's master of that particular data room, and a question comes up and we need to reference a document. Ask them and don't just ask them to send me the message over Teams so I can give the answer and get all the glory, but just give them the opportunity to speak up. It could be a simple answer of, yeah, check out file 7-4. It's going to tell you, these couple things, but at least they get used to using their own voice, in those calls. That may evolve even further to, okay, you can handle this call with this client on your own because it's just very routine. Ask a bunch of questions, take some notes, walk them through this. We're not, going through, this, mind-blowing strategy or delivering any secret sauce, but you're getting reps having that conversation. Similarly, calls with buyers that may not be deal specific, we may put some of those on their plate, kind of like what we've done with the sponsor coverage, individual. So all these things build up to, when they may be out there having some networking meetings on their own, trying to source business, talking to business owners on their own, presenting a sell side client to a potential buyer on their own. If we run a, robust process, we may have 50 to 75 NDAs signed or more on a deal. And most of those companies or buyers, we're going to have some level of live dialogue with, Teams or phone call. And, it becomes a divide and conquer effort to get everything done in a tight time frame. And so if the team is trained up to handle the basics, they may not be negotiating the deal yet, but they can at least hop on, tell the story, answer some questions, knock out a 15 or 30-minute call. They're going to grow. Now, if we find they're fumbling the pitch, the leash is pretty short. We're going to give them some feedback. They're not going to talk in the next call. They're going to observe. They may not take that call or lead that type of call on that deal at all, but we're going to give them a chance on the next deal. That's not a forever punishment. It might be probation for, a certain period of time until we can help them understand where do they miss, where they need to think differently about how they approach, the conversation, that sort of thing.
I don't know if you have an example off the top of your head, but anything you can think of when, someone really green was in a client meeting and you're like, did you just really say that? Or did you just really do that?
Oh, I don't think I have a great example off the top of my head. The problem is as seasoned as you are, that can always happen. We all have a different style for the way we handle things. The sign of a really good salesperson, and let's face it, at the end of the day, we can call ourselves whatever we want. Investment bankers, M&A advisors, we're salespeople. we have to go sell our services to the business owners or PE firms that are going to hire us. And we have to sell their companies to the market. A really good salesperson knows how to read the room, knows how to adapt the conversation to the person that they're talking to, and quickly picks up on what they care about, what they don't. What makes me cringe always, and this can happen whether you're green or you have decades of experience, you go into that meeting with an agenda in your mind, you completely miss what the other party of the conversation has said, and you just keep going back to your agenda, sometimes completely out of context to the conversation. I'm not sure how to give you an example without any committer of this crime knowing I'm talking about them, so I'm going to leave it general like that. But that's really, it's sales 101, yet it's probably the hardest part.
Yeah, read the room for sure. Yeah, because can you be casual and funny and try to crack a joke, or need to be serious? Like, hey, we got to get down to business. Like, because if you do one of the opposite, it can be really, really awkward.
Yeah, or they just told you they care about these two things. They don't care about those other five. You then just spent 10 minutes talking about the other five because you hadn't gotten to that part of your agenda.
Yeah, again, check
the end of the agenda, they care about those two. Hammer on those two, close the deal, stop talking, move on.
Exactly. So looking ahead, what advice would you give other, investment bankers, boutique investment bankers who want to build their team, grow the talent? Like, what are one or two things that you would give advice to them on developing out that team and committing to that long term?
So the first one is get out of your own way. And this harkens back to my answer to the first or second question, you asked, which was kind of the early going of building out a team. And I think I was the biggest thing that held us back, as I was nervous about, how much I'm spending as, we're getting this business off the ground in years 1 or 2. But, we find, a lot of the M&A advisors out there, frankly, whether it's Cornerstone or Unnetworked or, at any level, are top heavy shops. And the managing director is doing a lot of the work all the way kind of through the value chain of the services that we deliver. Or it's the managing director and an outsourced, company to build a sim and do some of the, kind of basic blocking and tackling. But like at the end of the day, the MD is doing everything. And that really, really restricts their output. And what holds a lot of people back is as they're training somebody up, they're not doing things the exact same way that you're doing them. Well, different isn't always bad or good. Sometimes it's just different. Additionally, perhaps you are the best M&A advisor that has ever walked the earth. Well, what does that mean? That means 80% of you is still pretty damn good. And you as an individual are not scalable. The AI is not there today, nor do I think it will be in the near future, to completely replace all the people around you. It can replace some of the mundane tasks, but there's still a lot that has to happen manually. There's still only so many phone conversations or meetings you can have throughout the course of the day. So if you build a team around you at all levels, now you have a business that can keep growing, that can multiply. And if it's, 100% of you and just you versus 20 other people who are 80% of your level plus you, which business do you think is going to be bigger and more successful and frankly more stable, and less volatile based on, any individual's performance, availability, capabilities, that sort of thing. So, that's really it. Get out of your own way, drop the ego, and recognize that, if you really want to build a firm, if you really want to build a business and not just have your own practice, you cannot do it without a team.
Practice what you preach. That's what we tell our clients all the time. Have a team in place. Get out of the business as much as you can. Don't let it, rely on you. And it's a lot of ways the way that.
Absolutely. That's a whole episode in and of itself, all the areas where investment bankers give advice and don't live it in their own companies, right?
Craig, this has been amazing. Now I'm going to throw a curveball at you because I was on your show recently and you said, what is some sort of advice or something that nobody has listened to in this episode or recently? What's something that you'll say to our listeners that they haven't heard before?
That is a curveball that I didn't see that one coming, but I will, knowing this audience is mostly investment bankers, I'm going to say that it is okay to be yourself. because ultimately a lot of why you're going to win is that the business owner who's hiring you forms a connection with you. And, I find a lot of people tend to be very guarded about their personal life, their families, their interests for, a variety of reasons, but mostly because, they have this notion that it's unprofessional to share that I went to this concert last night, or I like this type of wine, or whatever it is. And obviously with some limitations, if you're, walking into, the office of someone who to be Mormon, don't start talking about the bender you went on last weekend. But, as you can forge a personal connection with somebody, you are more likely to win in any sort of, competitive scenario. If the presumption is that they're talking to 2 or 3 firms just like you, and if they have the presumption that each of you are, reasonably on the same playing field, all capable and competent to do the job, because they wouldn't be talking to you in the first place, then why are they going to choose you otherwise? Is it going to be because you lie and tell them that their business is worth more than it really is? Yeah, yes, every once in a while, that's going to win you the mandate. More likely it's going to be because they connect with you and they trust you more so than, the others that, they have encountered. Being authentic, being yourself, giving a little more of yourself than, you might see others do will ultimately pay dividends.
Yeah, be a little vulnerable. Yeah, so take that leap of faith and put yourself out there. I love that. I have not heard that today, so thank you.
All right, then I answered the question successfully.
So let's talk a little bit, lastly, about your podcast. It's called The Close, correct? You just started it recently. What is the premise behind it? Where can our listeners, find that show, and what are they going to get out of, following it?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we started The Close spring, summer timeframe. I think we have recorded 12 to 15 episodes so far. Should have about 24 released by the end of the year. We're on all the major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. You can find us on our website. A lot of activity on LinkedIn around it. We talk about M&A. Our most common guests are former clients or other business owners who have been through a lot of M&A. So, there's a war stories meets, strategy, talking through the growth of their business, the decision to exit, what went through the transaction, and then, the postmortem of VH1, where are they now, type of a discussion. And then we bring on folks like you who are, in the M&A ecosystem, but, perhaps aren't, the business owner yourself, to give, unique perspectives on, what technology that can be brought to the M&A process, what makes a good M&A advisor, attorneys and accountants and private equity investors to give their spin on certain things. So, the primary audience is the business owner who's thinking about an exit at some point in the near future, but anybody who's involved in M&A will, get a good laugh, learn something valuable each and every episode.
Well, I think the M&A advisor, who is the main audience of this show, can learn a lot hearing straight from a business owner's mouth what they experienced during that process and what their mindset was and what they're thinking, how they view things. I think that would be hugely beneficial. So make sure to check out The Close, find it all the podcast spots. Make sure to like, share, comment, follow their episode each and every, I think you're every other week. Is that correct?
We about once a week we launch. We're typically on Thursdays. You'll see them drop.
Oh, same. So Thursday is a good podcast day for
all right.
Make sure to check out The Close. It's a great show led by Craig himself, an amazing person and a great member at Cornerstone International Alliance, and a great guest, 2-time guest. So thank you, Craig, for joining today. That is all we have for this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. I should say before I close, where else can they find more information about you and Caber Hill? I apologize. I got to ask that.
Yeah, real simple. Our website is caberhill.com. You can find, firm page and my page on LinkedIn. That's our most active social media channel by a mile. You can email me. It's real simple, craig@caberhill.com if you want to get in touch directly.
Sounds good. Craig, thanks again. Like, share, comment on this episode. I'll pass it on to anybody you think might benefit from our conversation here today. All of our episodes at cornerstoneia.com. M&A.com/podcast. Until next time, take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.